Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the newest episode of CAOverwatch, your number one place for everything related to Toronto Defiant and Canadian esports as a whole. I am your host, one of your hosts, as always, Spencer, and with me is Chris. Chris, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. Had a definitely an exciting week of Overwatch,
Yeah, you can
to
say
say
that.
the least.
Interesting, maybe more better to say interesting as opposed to exciting, but it was definitely interesting.
Yeah, no, it was certainly interesting. I mean, we had some good performance, had some bad performance, got a win, got a loss. It's hard to blame. I think it's hard to blame Toronto for a loss v Paris.
3-0,
They
0-3.
Yeah, it was a 0-3 to Paris, but what can you say, right?
No, I can say some stuff. So I was on Twitter and I had some
We
people
will-
with that
yeah,
same mentality of like, hey, it just shows that Toronto's not as good as Paris. And I was like, no, that's not. I don't think that's how you should look at it. I don't necessarily agree with that, but we'll give our opinions on Paris in a bit. So if you, I'm a little bit more like negative on that performance than some people. I saw some people just be like, hey, Paris is good, and we aren't, so it's fine. I'm like, no, I had that opinion when we played Philly.
Yeah.
But not necessarily when we played Paris. But that we're getting ahead of ourselves here. As you guys can see, I'm rocking the Toronto Ultra shirt. Toronto has an incredibly big weekend coming up as well. If you guys don't follow our other stuff, you should. If you're interested in the Call of Duty League or just Toronto esports in general, we just did a preview about how Toronto Ultra can get top 8. Really big performance coming up for the Ultra homestand for Call of Duty. But that's enough about Call of Duty. You guys follow us for the Overwatch. So let's just jump right into it. Chris, let's start first. Let's start positive, right? Glass half full. We go up against the Washington Justice, and we get a 3-0, Chris. Just give me some of your quick little thoughts on that game as a whole.
Well, if we want to stick with positive, I think that Toronto-Washington was a more like an upward trend for Toronto. I think that we got better kind of as the maps went on. I think Ilios, we started out quite poorly. A little bit. Like I still think we kind of did best on Hanamura map 2. We'll talk more about that
Hanamura was map 3. It was what was map 2?
Havana. Map 2 is Hanamura.
Hanamura, yeah, I'm Havana. I get those two mixed up all the time. I'm sorry. You're right. You're right. Continue.
Yeah, so I think, Ilios, I don't think it was best. I really didn't like what was going on. Our comp was a little bit funky, I think. Hanamura there are areas where I saw some positives in Hanamura, and then for me in Havana, we still won, but it wasn't. I think lots of our wins, apart from Hanamura, we just made less mistakes, so therefore we won. Wasn't we playing better?
I think actually Havana was our least successful map. Like I would actually put. I think that our best one was the second one, like you said, Hanamura. And that's what you said, like we got better as the thing progressed, but I actually don't think so. I don't think Ilios was as bad as you made it out to be. Like we got beat 100-0 in the very first one, but I think we were still trying to figure out that like Surefour Sombra comp, and then once we sort of got those hacks down, I think that we were able to show that we were the better team in that. So I think the last 2 maps went pretty well. Like I came away from Ilios with a positive notion, and then the big thing obviously was we subbed out Numlocked for the first time in a while and put in Beast. And I agree, Hanamura looked really good, right? We looked really coordinated. Beast had some really good moments. Surefour showed off not only can he play the Sombra, but he can also play the Ashe, which we already knew. Hanamura was a little sloppy, especially on attack. Obviously, we full held him on defense, which is really good. But in my opinion, what this just showed was, so there's 2 things. I was actually really happy with the ability to bounce back. We had a lot of momentum coming off of the Summer Showdown, and some people were still like, is this Toronto team legit? Are they, did they just get lucky? And I think Washington was a very losable game for us, but we came out there with a pretty good performance. I know I got memed on pretty hard, but the casters and the community as a whole about being like incredibly slow paced and about being like a super like poorly played game. I think that was overstated a little bit. I don't think it was like as terrible as some people made it out to be. And I find it like a little hypocritical that in the Summer Showdown, so many people were hyping up Washington and Tuba's Genji, right? I was watching a vast companion stream. There was legitimately people who picked Washington to beat the Shock in that round of 8. Like, go back to the general public's opinion after Washington beat Gladiators and Shock refused to run the Genji. People were like on the up and up in this Washington team, right? Packing 10 picked us over Washington because he thought they did a lot of good stuff with their coaching staff. People, they beat the Gladiators 3-1, and then all of a sudden they come into this game and everyone's like, the desks pick Washington over Toronto, and then Toronto wins 3-0, and everyone's just like, well, I guess Washington's really, really bad. And it's like, no, like Washington might have been still an okay team, just maybe Toronto isn't as bad as you think. Like, I still think it was a legitimate win for the Toronto Defiant that I was pretty proud of, even though I thought Havana was sloppy.
Look at, I understand what you're saying, and I want to move back to the point you're saying about the community memeing on Toronto too much and the casters talking about how slow they're playing. And that was actually something that I thought kind of was quite poor with Toronto. It looked like, for me, I almost agree with the casters. I think both the teams are playing very, very passive dive. And it looked like Toronto, and same with Washington, but Toronto was just waiting to capitalize on a mistake that Washington would eventually make. And I don't like, I guess that can kind of work against worse teams because you know they're going to make mistakes, but I don't necessarily think it's a good strategy in general, especially when you're playing better teams that don't make mistakes. Like, we weren't taking opportunistic dives and more aggressive dives. And I think I saw a little bit later on, especially when they were playing Paris, a couple times they're making more aggressive plays and it seemed to work out better. But against Washington, I just found that we were playing too passive, and it seemed like there wasn't really a voice telling us when we should do proper engages.
Yeah, and so don't get me wrong. I don't think Toronto played fast. I think this team did play slow. Like, when I say it got me on a little too hard, I just mean I don't think it was like a snail's pace that some people were making it out to be. I thought that. But don't get me wrong. It was definitely a slower paced game than what we saw throughout the weekend. It was the same Toronto team that played incredibly slow in the Summer Showdown, right? Like, that is a bit of an issue with us, that we do play like a counters puncher style, whereas sometimes with these comps, you just got to brawl a little bit, sort of initiate the action and take control. I thought it was like most prevalent on like Havana, where I think there was a moment where like Beast, I think gets like an early pick, or no, it was Havana, and it was when Washington was like split and they had three people on either side, and then Toronto made the right play and aggressively pushed the three people up top, right, and picked all three. And I was like, great decision. And then they just sort of like pushed the cart. And I was like, man, it's a 6v3. Like, push forward into the other three and then pick them and stagger them. And then you can probably just cap Havana 0.1 for free. But they didn't. They just like allowed them to like, they just pushed cart and then allowed the other three players to just sit in the back and like poke their shield and wait for their reinforcements to come through. And then Washington was actually able to win the fight. And I was like, Toronto, like, you have an advantage. Like, push that advantage. Like, take control. So don't get me wrong. I do agree that Toronto played slow. I just don't think it was a snail's pace, the worst game of the weekend that everyone made it out to be. And then one of the other final things I wanted to mention was I think this was just Agility's just straight bodying Tuba. Like, everyone was talking about Tuba's Genji this and Tuba's Genji that. And I think Agility just showed him the ropes.
Yeah, I think if there's anything to look positively on from this series, was Agility's bodying Tuba.
Oh, in my opinion, it was a big Genji diff.
There was a massive difference. He did quite well in that matchup, and I think that's one of the reasons why we did so well. I think another reason why we did so well, and especially map 2 and 3 for me, or we won map 2 and 3, was because Roar on the other team was not having good Ryan play. I think in Ilios, he actually was playing quite well, which is why it was a little bit tougher for us to win different Ilios, especially when
the monkey, right?
Surfer wasn't playing great on Sombra, but map 2, map 3, Hanamura and Havana, I think Beast was quite handily winning the upfront Ryan matchup against Roar, and that's one of the reasons why we had a good tank matchup and tank win against Washington's tank line.
Yeah, I mean, I don't fully disagree. I think that Roar isn't the best Reinhardt in the league, and definitely you saw that his monkey was a little bit better, but I think this was just like, I think we're just a better team than Washington, and I think Agility showed him the ropes, and I don't disagree that our tank line was actually able to create more space. So speaking of Beast actually finally came in. We saw him for the first time in a long time. A lot of people were pretty positive on him. I was like excited and I liked what I saw, but I wasn't like over the moon. You know what I mean? But like, what were some of your thoughts on his sort of performance?
Well, I think we were talking about this off air too, but he had some good shatters. He had some bad shatters. And I think that in the double shield meta, it is hard to fit in Ryan shatters where you will. So when he was getting good ones, I was totally happy with that.
Yeah. And I miss Beast Shatters. I think Beast Shatters has always been like the strongest part of his like Ryan kit. Yes. Like, Sometimes he overextends a
Yeah,
little bit. Sometimes he's out of position. You saw that a couple of times against Washington. You saw it more versus Paris. So I
yeah,
think he actually had a pretty poor game. But this map 2 and map 3 were, especially map 2, was like pretty good.
yeah. Map 2 and 3 is pretty good. And the last thing, like, I want to comment on also is kind of Cruz. I think that I don't know if I agree with the Brig pick initially, because it looks like, especially on Ilios, I noticed that the Brig pick was used to shut down your
The
you want to
dive.
play Break to shut down your dive, and specifically shut down either the Genji or more so the Tracer. But there's a couple times that I saw Stitch really just kind of popping off and not being contested by Cruz. So I mean, in the future, it'd be nice to see Cruz a little bit more, give the Tracer more respect. That was one thing that I wasn't too happy with, but it got fixed as the matches went on.
Yeah. I think that this is like a really poor. I think this is. Not enough people are talking about, I think, how poor of a meta this is for our support line. Like,
Yeah.
I think this support line would do really well in a Lucio Ana meta, Lucio Moira. Like, Baptiste Brig is, like, Creeves Baptiste is definitely his worst hero. I'd prefer his Moira, his Zenyatta, and obviously his Ana over it. I think his Baptiste is not the best. I think Cruz I'd probably rather see on Brig than, like, no, other than Baptiste, right? Like, maybe his Brig's better than his Baptiste. Like, even in a Zen meta, you put Creve in the Zen, that's good, but I think his Baptiste isn't great either. I think Cruz is like a good, like, Mercy / Lucio, but it's tough when he has to play these, like, more, like, mechanically demanding roles. I know Brig's not necessarily mechanically demanding, but it's still, like, the timing is really important, especially Baptiste. Whereas you look at teams like the Shock, right, where they run, like, Twilight and Violet, and you can really see the difference when you have, like, a really good Baptiste on your team. Because I think Creeves is a little bit too aggressive. He gets picked too much, and sometimes he gets picked too early. And he hasn't used Lamp, and that really hurts us in these fights. So I think we've talked enough about Washington. It was a good win. I don't like this narrative that Washington is just the worst team in the league all of a sudden, because people were really hyping them up before this. Really good win. Yeah. Agility's dominated Tuba. You absolutely love to see it. And then we go into Paris, and it was not a good win. It was a loss. It was a bad loss. It was 0-3. So you seem to be more in the position of the public, which was, hey, Paris is a really good team. It's not the end of the world. I want to hear your opinion, because I'm a little bit more disappointed in this game than I think most people, but I want to hear what you have to say first.
Okay, so I have an interesting theory about why we lost to Paris and why we didn't do as good, and comparing that to Summer Showdown. Mm-hmm. So everybody knows that we had a two-game played 2 games this weekend. So it is obviously a little bit tough to prepare for both teams and both teams' metas. So how I think we beat these teams, and how I think we beat Atlanta and how we beat LA in the Summer Showdown, is by kind of strategically outplaying them. Mm-hmm. So coming up with interesting strats that maybe they're not used to, apart from Agility's also just being a great Genji. I think that in some other places, our players are traditionally outmatched, but we seem to have decent, interesting strats that catch people off guard and help us win. Mm-hmm. But when we are in a new meta with these new hero bands and we have a 2-game weekend, it's hard to prepare for both. So when it came to Paris, we were generally just outmatched by their players. And we also, I don't think, had enough time to properly prepare a counter strat or something different against Paris. So naturally, we just didn't win.
I guess my biggest counterpoint to that was in the Summer Showdown, we also played 2 games on a weekend. And we had no time to prepare because we didn't know who we were going to play. Right? Like, we got picked by Valiant, and then we had to play them. We had time to prepare for Valiant, sorry. But we got picked by Atlanta. We had no idea who was going to pick us. We didn't know if the Shock were going to pick us or Atlanta. And then on, like, Wednesday's notice, we were able to, like, put that together and get a win there. So, like, don't necessarily agree with that. But I do agree that obviously playing 2 games one weekend is, like, detrimental to any team. Even though Paris also had to do it.
Yeah, so did Paris have a 2-game weekend that weekend as well?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, like, I guess maybe the difference between Summer Showdown and this was
did they have
it was open, no hero pools, and they had been on no hero pools for a little bit. So they had a little more time to figure out the general meta. Yeah. Like, you had not only 2 games, but you also had to figure out the general meta for this week anyway.
Yeah.
So I think I still think there's more on their plate for this week, and that's why I think Toronto, got beat by Paris. Like I think that our players are just generally outmatched by Paris, and then we also didn't have time to really make up a good strategy.
Yeah, I don't disagree. So I'm just looking to see if Paris played twice this weekend. I don't disagree that our players for the most part are outmatched. I think Agility's is really good. Genji, I think Sherfor can handle soon. Oh yeah, Paris did play twice. They played Vancouver. I think he could handle soon. And I think Sherfor actually had a pretty decent game. That was one of my biggest takeaways from this. I thought Sherfor played pretty well in the Astral. Although I don't know if we'll see him next week because I think Tracer is more of the meta. So I think you had Sherfor in there because they could swap to the Sombra if they wanted to play that Sombra. But I think moving forward it's going to be an Ashe Tracer. So I expect Logics to come back in, but we will see. I think this was a case where, first of all, I think Toronto played poorly. Like that's what, like the first thing I wanted to say was people said like, "Hey, we're just not as good as Paris," and it shows, and that's why we lost. It's like, no, there's a difference between you losing because the other team is better than you and you losing because you played poorly. A great example of us losing because the other team is better than us is go back and watch us play Philadelphia in the Summer Showdown. Philadelphia beat us. They were the better team. But if you watched how we actually played pretty decently, right?
Yeah.
The first map is pretty close. Li Jiang comes down to a couple fights here and there. Like they win because they're better, but we played well. It's the same with maps too. Kings Row, like we full cap, they full cap. They had a better second attack than we did. Like it is what it is, right? Like they're just a better team, but we actually played our strategy pretty well.
Yeah.
We fell apart a little bit on Anubis, but like I think that's part of the mental stuff too. Like you go down 2-0 versus Philly, it's tough to come back, and it was a long weekend. We had to play 3 games, but the point I was trying to make was like that was a moment where we got beat by a better team, and I was like, you know what, we lost 3-0, but it was a good game. This was like not that case. Like you go back to map 1 where this team has a 99% to 0 and they have to come back on like a wrecking ball just to touch, and then we pick the wrecking ball, and then we lose 5v6, like if not less, like with staggers. Like this team isn't as good as Paris, but we are not as bad as Paris. They should be able to beat us 5v6. Like that is not Toronto losing because Paris is a good team. That is Toronto losing because they played poorly in that situation. They choked it. Right. Another great example is Havana. Sherfor takes an off angle, throws a good dynamite, and picks Fielder. So he picks their Moira. It's a 5v6, and Paris doesn't have a Moira or ultimates, and they just run into us and win the fight. Like that's not Toronto losing because Paris is a better team. Like we're a better team 6v5 with no Moira. They have no Moira heals. Like we should win that fight 10 times out of 10. And Paris is still able to pick us. Like, in my opinion, that's just a good example of Toronto playing poorly. On Anubis, Agilities goes up and blades into 5 people with absolutely no follow-up. Like, that's not Sparkle popping off. That's not Hanbin hitting an incredible flux. That's just like I was like, where's the follow-up? But that's just like a poor executed blade by Toronto that we weren't seeing in the Summer Showdown. Right? Usually if Agility were blades...
So I actually agree. I do usually say that...
Oh, I think we just lost Chris. Sorry, guys. Chris is in Alberta. His internet isn't the best. So I'm going to try to take this one here. We're just going to go on the fly, if you will. So, yeah, sorry for my rant. I got a little bit heated there. But you're back. Sorry, Chris. You totally just cut off. You just were frozen for like a solid 10 seconds. So please repeat your point.
Okay.
Trying to
so,
improvise.
yes. So, what else? Yeah, bad internet here, guys. PSA. So I actually do agree with you when I did say that Paris was better than us. Like I do think they mostly beat us for the fact that they're better than us, but I do think that Toronto made a lot of very sloppy mistakes as well. One point that stood out for me that you didn't mention was Anubis defense point A when we basically split Paris. So I think their DPS and one of their supports was being kind of held at the very front gate by Agilities. And I think 2 of their tanks and their Baptiste got top left, and they're just pretty much by themselves. They pretty much got split. And then our team was way too slow to figure out what to do. We didn't do anything. We just held that little spot by the pillars that we usually do. And then they just pinched on us and beat us. Like that was a classic point that we could have just collapsed on one of the squads of 3, eliminated them, and finished off the other one, and we just didn't do it.
I know, I totally agree. Like that's what I mean. So again, I don't want to come on here and be too negative. Like, it is what it is. Paris is a good
Yeah.
team. But I saw a lot of narratives of being like, wow, that Paris is a good team. And it's like, no, like, they are a good team. And if you had asked me going into this game, what do I think the outcome would be? I probably would have said 3-0 or 3-1 Paris. I'm not disappointed by the scoreline. I was disappointed by the play that I saw. Like, you can still look at that game and be like, Toronto played poorly. Even though Paris is a good team, they didn't beat us because they were a good team. They beat us because, like, we made a lot of sloppy mistakes. And then they're good enough to, like, not throw. You know what I mean? Like, if you get a 5v6 and you just, like, don't target focus and, you know what I mean, play split, like, they're able to capitalize on that, but that shouldn't have happened in the first place. So that's sort of my rant.
Yeah.
I just want to get that off my chest because a lot of people were saying, I mean, I've said it so many times, you know what I mean? It wasn't my favorite game from Defiant. It was their second game of the weekend. This team isn't used to it. I don't know how much of that is, again, like, maybe, man, like, I like Beast and Ryan and I want to see Beast succeed. I don't know if it's the lack of shot calling because you lose a guy like Numlocked. You know, maybe we have to see him come back in and for the more decisiveness because I think mechanically Beast is still there. And I don't want to put this on Beast because I actually think Numlocked Nevix got dunked on by Hanbin. That was another point I was going to bring up. I think Hanbin dunked on Nevix. I think this team performs really well when Nevix can, like, create space for himself and, like, take that, like, Sigma 1v1. Like, we beat Atlanta because I think Nevix can hang with Hawk. We beat Valiant because I think Nevix can hang with McGravy. We beat Washington because I think Nevix on Sigma can hang with Janu. But then as soon as you play a team like Philadelphia who has Fury or Paris who has Hanbin, I think there's a pretty clear off-tank matchup there. And I think that's why also, like, Beast struggles as much to create space because he was just, like, Hanbin was just popping off. Like, getting, like, 3-4 picks to fight. Like, I think Hanbin was their sort of play. Like, I wasn't even sitting there going, like, oh my God, Sparkle's so amazing, even though his Doomfist was amazing. I was more impressed by how much, like, Hanbin was sort of impacting the game.
Yeah, I know. It was that. It's like, it's just, unfortunately, just a bunch of small decisions too that just piled up on top of each other and made it so he didn't have a good round. I mean, like, you know, why doesn't Sureforce switch off from McCree when they don't, like, establish point pressure in Lee Jane Tower round 2? Why did Agility's alt in a closed room by himself against 5 other players?
With no follow-up.
It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. I think we've talked enough about this.
I agree.
So let's move on to previewing the match against Philly that we have this weekend.
Such a tough
What are your
schedule.
thoughts, Spencer?
Such a tough, Toronto goes from being top 4, and I can already see the narrative change. Like, Toronto's so bad, I'm like, guys, like, I mean, I think we played poorly, but we played against Paris. They just won the whole summer showdown tournament in a Genji meta, and then now we have to play Philadelphia, who came second. Like, how's that? Man, I feel like we've been shot. I gotta look at these last 3 tournaments. Our qualification rounds have been tough. Thank God. I mean, we usually get 1. Really tough. And thank God it was a 3-0 because I didn't even mention that. That's going to help us for our standings because I'm almost certain we're going to go 1 and 2. Like, hey, guys, I'm a big Toronto fan. I want nothing but the best. But in a Tracer Genji meta with Carpe, EQO, with the Sato on Ron, unless Beast comes in there and just dunks on Sato for some reason, somehow.
Yeah.
Man, it's going to be such a hard tournament. I'm going to try to be positive and, like, give my keys to victory or, you know, off the top of my head, how I think Toronto's going to win. I think it's going to have to be off of that. I think we're either going to have to it's funny. I was actually thinking you might see Logics because you might have to play the Tracer, but I wonder if we just go, you know what, if they play Tracer, we're gonna have to beat them by countering their comp as opposed to mirroring because I don't think we're good enough to mirror their comp and win. So it's gonna have to be like, it's gonna have to be like come up with a cooler strategy. Maybe it is running Sureforce on the Sombra and hope that you can get some hacks in and hope that you can make that work. Maybe play Numlocked on the Monkey. You just try to run a lot of dive. I don't know the map pool, but maybe that's how you're gonna have to do it. Maybe it's just like you play Logics, but you play him on the Ashe and you try to win the Ashe versus Tracer matchup like we saw Florida do versus Atlanta, so you know what can work. Or maybe if they're playing Carpe on Ashe, then maybe you bring Logics in and you run the Tracer and try to win the Tracer versus Ashe. Like, it's going to have to be like play some cool strategy and hope that you can kind of beat them in that regard because I think if you just go the mirror, they're just a better team. They're just going to win.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think I totally agree with that. They have to find an interesting strat that Fusion doesn't know. And I am cool if we lose 3-1, 3-0. I just want to see the little mistakes not being made. I want them to beat us because they're a better team, not because we are making mistakes in a worse team.
Totally agree. And again, I went a little hard on them versus Paris, but it's because these are some blatant mistakes I think could be fixed. Like, you're right. If we see Agilities with some better blades and some more follow up, we see, a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more decisiveness in the comp. I'm okay with the 3-0. Like, we got 3-0 versus Philly in the Summer Showdown, and I had nothing but good things to say about that experience, right? And it wasn't even just because it was a top 4, it was because I actually thought we played pretty well against them. This was a little bit less so versus Paris, but I think Philly's you're gonna have to see some improvements.
Yeah, it's interesting that I was actually watching Overwatch League's official power rankings. They still power ranked us at 5.
Like, I think you kind of have us at 5 until a team takes it from us, right? Like, I mean, we've so far our last 3 losses since this meta, we've beaten LA, we've beaten oh god, I can't even think. Atlanta. Right? We've beaten Washington. I guess technically we did lose to Dallas, so I'd actually probably put Dallas at 4, but like, we've only lost to Paris and Philly. Those are our only 2 losses, and even after this one, it still might be our only 2 losses. So I'm not going to consider this team not top 5 because currently I have it. I mean, not that we do this really on the show, but I have Shock number 1 still because they're Shock, Paris, then Philly, even though I think that those top 3 are really, really close. And then I might actually put Dallas Field number 4.
Yeah.
Even though they had a gong show versus the Houston Outlaws in like a reverse sweep, biggest C9 I've seen in a long time. And then probably Toronto.
They had, I think, Mayhem in 4th, and then Toronto.
That's also not a bad call. But again, I think Mayhem, Dallas, and Toronto are all in that tier with the Houston Outlaws. I'd put those 4 in that next like upper echelon of teams.
Yeah, I agree.
But we'll see.
Unless you have anything else to say, I think that's it. I think we covered all of our bases.
My last question was going to be Chris, Beast or Numlocked going into the next match.
Look, I think in a couple of years, Beast is going to be a great player. A year, 2. We just work on his shot calling, but right now we need shot calling. I think it's pretty obvious what was wrong, partially with our gameplay in Washington and Paris, and that was our shot calling. So I want Numlocked to be in there, and I want Beast to keep on learning about how to shot call and how to really be a team leader. And then I want him in there.
I'm going to take the other angle. I'm going to say Beast because I know that Beast used to play for Fusion University, used to play against guys like Alarm. I know he's hungry. Talked about in the post-game interview that he can't wait to play Philadelphia because I think Zoe asked him if you could beat one team, Paris or Philly, what would it be? He said Philly for that reason. The last time they played where it was close and it was a 3-2, Beast was in the lineup. So I'm hoping that he comes back hungry and tries to get that win. So, but yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. You brought up some good points too. There's arguments for both. So I'm curious to see what happens. Logic is sure for I think it's going to be depending on the meta. And we didn't really talk about it. Last 30 seconds, it was nice to see Surefour back in and perform well. I just want to say that.
Yes.
I think he's had a tough year. I think we've been critical of him at points. I think Logis has performed really well, but it was nice to see Surefour coming on the Ash, and he was actually one of the bright spots for the team versus Paris. So I just want to give a little shout out to Surefour there. I
really liked him on the Hanamura.
Yeah, it was nice to see a Canadian DPS on it back, baby. Let's get it.
Let's go.
Surefour agilities.
Anyway, if you guys like this video, please like, subscribe. If you disagree with everything we say, leave a comment. We'll debate you to the end of days. At least Spencer will on our YouTube.
I enjoy that.
And would you like to sign us off, Spencer?
Sure. You know what? Thank you so much for watching, guys. Like, subscribe, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, all those fun things. And as always, enjoy.